Hello everybody, I'm Arden. Welcome to another episode of Minecraft Enigmatica 2 Expert. So as you can see, we're still in our advanced rocketry lab, and I thought we had smooth sailing to continue on through the rest of this pack. And I figured I'd make this next episode about making titanium, because we need that to progress through advanced rocketry, right? Well, I goofed. I got my recipes mixed up. I thought titanium was attainable, and, well, it is, but we have to delve outside of advanced rocketry to do it for now. The problem is, to make it, we need to do a modular machinery advanced metallurgic fabricator to make titanium early game. As per this recipe right here, which requires liquid chlorine, magnesium ore, which we've got a decent amount of, some salt, which we can do that, and then carbon plates, which is, all of that's easy, and that will get us small amounts of titanium. The problem is, well, we need to make the advanced metallurgic fabricator, which we can't easily do because this requires a machine controller, and the machine controller requires an AE2 controller from Applied Energistics 2. Well, since we haven't built that yet, I guess this episode is going to be about Applied Energistics, and we're going to go build out our basic storage system for it to begin with, because if we've got to build one, we might as well build two. So let's jump right into that. So before we get too deep into this, I want to be clear. I'm not an expert on Applied Energistics. I'm not. I've spent years mostly avoiding this mod. I know the basics of it. I know how it generally operates. I know what it can do. I just personally feel like it's one of those things that makes things too easy in most packs. So I just generally avoid it. It, however, is pretty much completely necessary in this pack. So, to get started with an ME network, you generally want to build an ME controller. This lets you build out a much larger system than you can without using it. You can only really hook up like 8 machines or things in general without it. With one of these, you can hook up significantly more. And to build it, we just need skystone blocks, which we have a ton of from mining meteorites to get the presses for this. A circuit board that you've seen me build before in the last episode to make the advanced rocketry stuff. An energy acceptor, which we've got one sitting on the floor right here, so we've already made that. Fluix blocks, which we made those to make the other stuff here. Machine cases, which we can replicate. And a Fluix pearl, which is not any harder than anything else we've done, really. So at this point, this is actually pretty trivial to put together because we've already done all the legwork for it. So let me go slap this together. All right, so I've got the ME controller and a few other pieces for the very basic setup made. I also dug a hole out here under my storage room. It's just quick and dirty and it's ugly for now. I'll probably clean it up later, but this is just to get it started and give me a crawl space to work in. So let's start by placing the ME controller down. I want it off the ground right now because I want to be able to connect to all the sides of the face eventually. One of the first things we need to do is plug it in some power. I'm going to grab the energy acceptor that I plugged into my crystal growth chamber, and I'm going to take that out and plug that directly in so the energy acceptor has power. Next, we need to plug this into the ME controller itself. For now, I'm just going to start with basic ME glass Fluix cables, and we're going to plug it in this way. And there, now it's lit up and turned on. Let's also connect it back to the crystal growth chamber to power that back up. And now we have the very basic starting network done. The next thing we need to do is to plug it into our inventory system and make it useful. And to do that, we need something called an ME storage bus, which is a pretty simple to make item. It's just 2 pistons and then an ME interface, which is just more basic materials. It also involves these formation and annihilation cores, which are pretty simple to make, which we'll also need more of in the next step. For now, let's plug this in. And you need to start by taking the storage bus and plugging it directly into your drawer controller or whatever it is inventory system you want to plug it into. It can be a chest or anything else, really. And we just plug it in like that, and now all of a sudden it is working. Device is online, and it now has access to our inventory. Now, you might wonder what that purpose serves. Well, the next thing we want to build to add to this is something to interface with the inventory. And that's the ME terminal, which uses these cores that we made previously, which are all pretty simple to make, as well as another processor and a screen, which is also fairly easy to make. And once you've made your screen, you can just attach it to the cables like everything else. And once you've got it, you can just right click into it and you can see all of the inventory you have attached to it. And take things out or put them back in. Now that itself is sort of useful, and we can pipe this all around our base, but there's something else you can do. And it starts with taking that back off. Because from the ME terminal, you can make another thing called the ME crafting terminal from a crafting table and another processor. And having upgraded this terminal to a crafting terminal, we can then put it back. And with it attached like that, we can then click into it and it looks the same, except now we can craft directly from it. So say I wanted to directly craft the piston, we can then move everything into it, and anything that's missing will not be here because currently I don't have plates in here, but everything else is within my storage network. And that's the very first step towards any sort of automation. Now we need to add a couple of these terminals throughout my base, and we need to connect it to all of the crates back over there. So we have access to everything that I've made, and we probably need to move a couple of the ones we have upstairs or find ways to wire them in. But that gets us at least started on a basic storage system with this. From here, the next thing we can actually do is use AE2's own storage system, which are the network drives. And to do that, we need to make an ME drive, which is basically a drive bay that collects all of the storage units to store them into. And overall, it's also pretty simple to make, other than the disk drive here, which requires things that we thankfully have seen from making turtles before to make the automated users. Once you've made the ME drive, just like everything else, you need to hook it up to the network. So for now, we'll just put it right here with the rest. And once you do that, you need to put storage drives in it. Thankfully, I've gotten a couple of the max ones from loot chests so far, so we can use those to show you how this works. But to give you an idea of how they work, there's various sizes of them, but for the smallest 1K one, it can store up to 63 types of items within it, and depending on how many different types of items in it, they have different amounts of max sizes. It's sort of like using a storage drawer network, where the storage drawer with one slot can hold more than the storage drawer with 4 slots in it, except it works more dynamically in this case, depending on how many different types of things you put into it. You need to make a storage housing, which is pretty simple to make, as well as a storage component, which isn't much harder. It's just service crystals and a logic processor. As you go up to the 64K ME one, which is the ones I've gotten out of the chests, they become a bit harder to make, but not that much. They really just cascade up in larger sizes. Most people tend to think that it's cheaper just to make more of the drives and then toss a bunch of 1K storage into it than making the 64s. But it's really up to you if you want to even use it at all. But once you have the storage, shift right click to open it up and put them inside of it. Once you have them, you can come back to your terminal, open it up, and you can put anything you want into it at that point. So we'll do that, and let's toss the Flux cables in there. And then we can come back down and look at the ME drive and look at the storage side. You can see that it's storing 2 types, and it's used a little over 1,000 of its memory. So overall, these are actually pretty good for just bulk storage of a bunch of random different stuff, as much as you're willing to pack into it. It's harder to just browse than like a storage drawer network, where you can just take an eyeball and see what you have where, if you just need to go grab something without just going through an interface for it. But ultimately, it's up to you to determine what works best for storage for you. Alright, so I made a stack of storage buses, and you see that I've got a different colored cable going back here. And one of the things we should discuss right now before we move forward is the fact that these cables have a concept called channels within them. And these cables can only process so much stuff at a time from different inputs. I'm using something called a smart cable. There are normal cables that do not display the channel information on them. The smart cables at least let you see what's happening. Dense cables can support up to 32 channels within them. You can see that it's currently using 8 of the 32. We go to the purple one above it, which is a different channel. It is using 3 of 32. And this one's colored purple, and this is Flux, which is a universal color. It can connect to any other color. If we come back into my storage area, you can see that I now have storage buses connected to a handful of my crates. These are the more useful general storage ones, and that the cable changes color right before. Right here is the end of the dense Flux cable. It says 8 of 32 channels used. Right next to it we have white. White cannot connect to any other color other than white or Flux ones. That's true of any color. So long term, if I add buses to all of these, I'm going to have to do 3 different colors, because this is a normal non-dense cable. They can only do 8 channels total. So if I wanted to cover all of these boxes, I will have to use 3 different colors to run them across all of the crates. Because as you can see, it says it's 8. After you get past this storage bus right here and look at this cable, you see that it says 7, because it only counts the ones that pass through it to wherever the controller is. So this one counts at this cable and back, but it doesn't count back here if we wanted to create another subsystem that used some of the excess free channels. But now that I have these wired up, we can go back into the terminal here, and you can see that I have access to the things sitting inside those crates. Things like my apiaries, pants, and hat and whatnot, and I can shove stuff in and put it back. But if I do, be aware that it does not necessarily put it back where it started. In this case, it shoved it into my gem and dust box right here. So be aware that without filters, it may not end up where you want it to be. So inside here, there are slots for setting up a filter. You can put in whatever you want into the storage bus. You can do this to pull things in nearby. It pulled in the first section of the crate, but the crate contains way more than this filter can actually reasonably hold. So it won't always be good if you're using a big huge junk box somewhere. This is a normal chest, it works fine. The capacity card right here is what you would need to do to increase the amount of slots this has available to it. And they're not too bad to make, really. I'm not going to set this up for filtering right now because I honestly don't feel like it's worth it. There's also the inverter card, which turns it from a whitelist to a blacklist. There's also something else I should point out before we continue on too much further, and that's the Inscriber. The AE2 Inscriber is notoriously hard to automate, especially with AE2 itself, just due to how it works. The imports for it are side dependent on the Inscriber, which means you can't just hook up a single hopper and dump items into it and expect them to go into the right spot, because they're not going to. Another thing to be aware of is that it cannot take stacks of items. It can only take singular ones, which means you can't even lock a slot that way to make sure things go in properly. So to make any of the more complicated chips that require multiple steps or multiple pieces, you have to have the means to inject things into all three slots. But what might not be instantly apparent is that there is an advanced Inscriber from AE2 Stuff in this pack, and it is really simple to make once you make your first couple processors. And this is the processor that I was talking about, where it requires 2 chips and redstone from 3 different slots. If we make the advanced Inscriber real fast and slot it in here, you can see that all of a sudden we can toss in whole stacks of things, as well as lock slots so that they can't be changed, which at least helps mitigate the need to even automate this in the short term. It makes it so that you can make large batches of processors without actually wiring up a huge chain to do it. Oh, something obvious I also completely missed. The advanced Inscriber needs to be powered by AE2, so it needs to be on your AE2 network, unlike the normal Inscriber. Or at least has to be fed via an energy acceptor on an ad hoc network. Alright, so now that we've got this all done, I think it's probably a good time to call it a day. We did something that I probably should have done, I don't know, months ago at this point, and I probably would have done my storage differently had I done this sooner. I probably don't need the crates set up the way that I currently have them now, because now I can turn them into junk crates, or I can add in more storage drives into the ME drive behind me. Anyhow, this was still a big step and got us moving back towards advanced rocketry. So, as always, I'm Ard. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.